A rich man tried to humiliate her. Her piano response left him speechless. "You play piano?" the man drawled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass like he was stirring mischief. The dining room had gone quiet enough to hear the clink of ice. "Come on then. Let's see it." Jada froze, tray in hand, the coffee pot steaming beside her wrist. Her eyes darted from the man in the tailored cream suit to the gleaming grand piano in the corner of the upscale Atlanta restaurant. She hadn't even looked at that piano in months, hadn't touched one in years. Not since. "What's the matter?" he smirked. "I thought Southern girls had charm." A low chuckle rumbled around the nearby tables. His friends leaned back in their chairs, eyes already brimming with the kind of gleeful cruelty Jada knew too well. One of them whispered loud enough to be heard, "Bet she thinks gospel's the only music out there." Jada's grip tightened on the tray. The manager stood by the host's stand, shifting nervously, watching, doing nothing. "Sir, I'm not," she started, but he waved a dismissive hand. "You work here. I'm a paying customer. Let's see what that pretty smile and those fingers can do besides pour coffee." The dining room wasn't just quiet now. It was still, stuck in that unbearable moment where humiliation sat perched on the edge of power. And that's when something in her snapped. She placed the tray gently on a nearby table, walked past the stunned maitre d', and sat down at the piano. Her back was straight. Her hands hovered over the keys like they were remembering an old language. Then she began to play. Not softly, not timidly, but with fury, with grace. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's prelude in C-sharp minor exploded through the dining room. Each chord a declaration, each crescendo a rejection of every smirk, every assumption, every silence she'd swallowed behind an apron. Eyes widened. Forks paused midair. And the man in the cream suit, he stopped smiling. The final chord lingered in the air like a storm refusing to leave. No one moved. Jada lifted her hands slowly, her breathing measured, heart thundering in her chest. She didn't look at the man who had dared her. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. The hush of 100 people realizing they had just witnessed something too big for a dinner menu. Then someone clapped. One set of hands, uncertain at first. Then another. Then all at once, the restaurant erupted into applause, rising like a wave crashing against the marble walls. Jada stood, her palms still warm, knees steady despite the tremble coursing through her spine. Her gaze flicked toward the man in the cream suit. He hadn't clapped. He sat rigid in his chair, the smug curl of his lips now a tight, bitter line. The flush creeping up his neck betrayed more than embarrassment. It was disbelief, offense even, that she had turned the joke back on him. She gave him nothing, not a glance, not a smile, just turned and walked back toward the kitchen, where her manager stood slack-jawed and blinking like he'd just watched a ghost play Chopin. "Jada, I didn't know you could," he stammered. "You never asked," she said quietly, brushing past him. Behind her, the applause faded into murmurs, then whispers. People leaned toward each other, phones already out, some recording, others asking waitstaff for her name. But the man who had demanded a performance? He sat frozen, alone in his seat, like the air around him had shifted, and he was the only one who didn't know how to breathe in it. He wasn't used to being ignored. Not by staff, not by strangers, and certainly not by a black woman in an apron. The man in the cream suit, Carlton Dempsey III, heir to a Georgia real estate empire, sat stiffly, staring at the keys she had just struck like they'd betrayed him. Around him, the energy had shifted. Diners whispered her name, Jada, as if it had weight now. Some had stood to applaud her again when she disappeared into the kitchen. His guests, his entourage, weren't laughing anymore. "That was unexpected," mumbled the woman to his right, dabbing her lips with a napkin to hide a smirk. Carlton's hand curled into a fist on the table. "She's just a waitress," he muttered. His business partner leaned in, voice low but sharp. "She's also a prodigy, apparently." That was concert-level playing. Carlton's eyes flicked to the corner where the piano stood, now sacred, untouchable. He tried to shake it off, tried to call the server, but they didn't come. None of the staff rushed to his table anymore. Across the room, a young man in a hoodie whispered to his date, That video's gonna blow up. What's her handle? Anyone tag her yet? Carlton pushed back his chair abruptly, metal legs screeching. We're leaving. But even as he walked out, the door swinging behind him, the restaurant didn't pause, didn't bend toward his exit. It had already found its new center. And it was somewhere behind that kitchen door, where Jada stood, still catching her breath, still unaware that the rest of her life had just begun to shift. In the kitchen, everything was too quiet. The usual clang of pans, the hiss of searing steaks, the low drone of back-and-forth orders, gone. Jada leaned against the stainless steel counter, her fingers trembling now that no one could see them. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. "Girl," said Maria, the line cook, barely above a whisper. "What? What did you just do?" Jada didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was still inside the chords, inside the fury, the grief, the release that poured through her fingertips and out into that white and gold dining room like fire. It had been years. Since Juilliard. Since her mom got sick. Since dreams folded into double shifts and side gigs. The sous chef peeked out from the swinging door, then looked back at her like he was staring at someone he didn't know. "They're still talking about you. Someone's asking for your name, for your social. There's already a clip online." Jada's eyes widened. "What?" He nodded. "You're trending." A sudden lump formed in her throat. That performance hadn't been for them. It had been for survival. A moment taken back from someone who tried to reduce her to a joke. And now, it was out in the world. "You okay?" Maria asked softly. Jada nodded, slowly. "Yeah," she said. "I think I am." But in the back of her mind, fear whispered, what happens next? That night, Jada barely slept. She lay on her twin mattress in the corner of her studio apartment, the ceiling fan turning slow overhead, casting shadows across the walls. Her phone buzzed nonstop. DMs, mentions, shares. She hadn't even seen the video yet. It was one of the bartenders, Kyle, who had recorded it from the corner of the restaurant, just as Carlton Dempsey had started mocking her. The video opened with his sneer, his lazy taunt. And then, her, walking calmly to the piano, sitting, and playing like the room didn't matter, like the music had been waiting all this time to escape her bones. The comments poured in by the hundreds. Who is she? That's not just talent. That's rage turned into art. You can feel the weight in her hands. She's been silenced before. She deserves a stage, not a table number. Someone had even tracked down an old YouTube clip of her as a teen, winning a national piano competition at 17. It had maybe 2,000 views yesterday. Now, over 500,000. She sat up, phone still in hand, heart thudding against her ribs. The shame that man had tried to wrap around her had unraveled, and in its place, something new had started forming. Something terrifying. Something possible. She didn't know what it meant yet. But for the first time in a long time, Jada felt like the world might be listening. 2 days later, the restaurant's phone wouldn't stop ringing. People weren't calling for reservations. They were asking for her. "Can we speak to Jada, the pianist? Is she performing again tonight? Would she consider an interview?" The owner, Mr. Renner, pale and bewildered, pulled her aside in the prep room just after lunch. I didn't know you had that in you," he stammered, like she'd been hiding a scandal rather than a gift. "We've got reporters asking for you. Local news. A radio station called, and some blogger wants to do a feature." Jada wiped her hands on her apron. "I didn't do it for attention," she said quietly. Renner nodded, glancing down, sheepish. "I know, but attention's here now." Outside, she could hear someone on the floor ask again, "Is Jada playing today?" She wasn't scheduled for a shift, but they were asking like it was a show, like the tip jar was now a ticket booth. Renner scratched the back of his neck. "Listen, if you ever wanted to, just for a night, we could clear a slot. Put you on the piano. Dinner and music kind of thing." Jada stared at him. The same man who'd once told her to keep her head down and smile more was now offering her a stage. She almost laughed. But instead, she said, "I'll think about it." And when she stepped outside to get some air, she didn't bring her apron. She hadn't told anyone yet, but Jada had opened the old storage bin beneath her bed the night before. Inside, wrapped in a worn cloth, was the faded acceptance letter from Juilliard. Another envelope held her withdrawal form. A third contained her mother's hospital bills, the final ones that had made the decision for her. She sat on the floor with those papers, lit by the soft blue glow of her phone, scrolling through strangers' comments. Some were musicians. Some were just people who recognized something in her that she hadn't dared believe was still there. One woman wrote, "I quit piano 10 years ago. I'm going back. Watching you reminded me why I started." Jada didn't cry. Not then. But the ache that had lived in her chest, quiet, folded beneath the day-to-day, stirred. Now it was Sunday morning, and her inbox held a new message. It was from a professor at Spelman College. Music department chair. Subject line, "Let's talk." She clicked. "I saw your video. What you did wasn't just art, it was defiance. It was history at the Keys. Would you be open to visiting the campus? Not as a student. As a guest. As an artist." Jada stared at the screen. She had been somebody's example of smallness for so long. She'd nearly forgotten what it felt like to be seen whole. The microphone felt heavier than it looked. Jada sat across from a local NPR host in a modest studio, her headphones warm against her ears. Outside, the Atlanta skyline gleamed under a soft, forgiving sun. "Jada Monroe," the host began, smiling warmly. "You've become something of a local legend this week. A waitress with a classical background, silencing a dining room with Rachmaninoff. Let's start there. What was going through your mind in that moment?" Jada exhaled slowly, the memory still vivid. "Honestly, I wasn't thinking. Not in words, anyway. It was more like survival." The host leaned forward. "Survival? Yes. That man. He wasn't just mocking me. He was trying to shrink me. Make me entertainment. Remind me where he thought I belonged." She paused. "But he didn't know where I came from. Or what I left behind." The host nodded, her tone gentle. "And what did you leave behind?" "Juilliard. Competition circuits. A scholarship. A life I'd spent a decade building." A beat of silence passed between them. "Would you go back to it now?" the host asked. "Now that the world's listening?" Jada looked through the studio glass, past her own reflection. "I'm not going back," she said, her voice clear. "I'm going forward." The host smiled again, sensing the shift. And across Atlanta, radios buzzed with the voice of a woman who had once been told to pour coffee, and now poured truth instead. The flyer was simple. White background, black serif font. One image, a piano, spotlighted in soft gold. "An evening with Jada Monroe. Live at the Velvet Room." The Velvet Room was no dive. It was Atlanta's premier jazz and classical fusion lounge, its stage graced by names that had toured the world. Jada stood at the back of the venue, staring at her name under the house lights. A week ago, she was serving crème brûlée to people who never saw her. Tonight, there were posters with her face on them hanging in windows across the city. The manager greeted her like she was a headliner. She was. "You've got a packed house," he said, beaming. "Journalists, music teachers, even a couple of scouts from a label in the audience." Jada adjusted the satin cuffs of her blouse, breath steady. "I'm not looking for a deal," she said softly. "Then just give them what you gave that restaurant," he replied. But louder. Backstage, her fingers hovered over the keys again. Not in a corner this time. Not for someone's amusement, but on her terms. As the lights dimmed and the first hush settled over the audience, Jada stepped into the glow, her silhouette framed by applause. She sat, touched the keys, and this time, she played not from pain, but from power. In the second row, partially hidden behind a raised wine glass, sat Carlton Dempsey III. He hadn't planned on being there, but one of his advisors insisted he see what the internet had turned into a local movement. "You need to understand the damage," he'd said. "You went viral for the wrong reasons." Carlton had scoffed, but curiosity was a stubborn thing. Now he sat, collar open, tie loosened, watching the woman he'd once mocked as she played a piece he couldn't name, but couldn't stop feeling. It wasn't just technical brilliance. It was layered, like she was pulling sound from a deeper place. Notes that held teeth, then softened into grace. Rage and elegance braided together. People around him swayed, cried, closed their eyes, and Carlton sat still, drowning in a silence he couldn't control. When the final note faded, the audience rose to their feet. Thunderous applause. A full standing ovation. Carlton didn't stand. He couldn't. Jada looked out over the room, face calm, eyes sharp. And for one brief moment, just one, her gaze landed on him. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, just held his stare, then looked away. Carlton felt something cold settle in his chest. It wasn't hate. It was irrelevance. After the show, the crowd swelled backstage. Friends, former classmates, artists, teachers she hadn't seen in years. And offers. So many offers. One from a regional orchestra wanting to commission a piece. Another from a nonprofit that hosted music programs for underserved kids. Even a quiet inquiry from a documentary filmmaker who'd flown in from Chicago that morning. Jada didn't rush. She moved through the room with poise, not the polished performance kind, but the quiet knowing that she had earned her name back. She wasn't just the girl who used to play. She wasn't that waitress who shocked the restaurant. She wasn't a novelty. She was an artist. And more than that, she was her mother's daughter. She'd left Juilliard to care for the woman who taught her, Claire de Lune, with 2 fingers and a humming voice, who used to sit beside her, eyes closed, and whisper, "Make the piano breathe, baby. Not scream. Breathe." That night, Jada held the memory like a second spine. When a journalist asked her for a quote for the headline, she didn't hesitate. "This was never about proving myself to a man in a suit," she said. "It was about remembering who I was before the world told me to shrink." 2 weeks later, the restaurant where it all began added live music to its Friday nights. They left the piano exactly where it was, but dusted, tuned, and lit with care. The manager offered Jada a spot on the lineup. She politely declined, not out of pride, but because her time was no longer for sale by people who never saw her worth until a camera did. She had accepted an artist-in-residence offer at Spelman. 3 nights a week, she taught masterclasses on interpretation, performance, and resilience. Not just how to play, but how to reclaim what's yours in a room that tries to make you small. Sometimes she'd pass by the restaurant on her walk home. The piano glimmered through the window, now played by students, locals, even a retired teacher who came to feel young again. And no one asked the players to prove they belonged. Carlton Dempsey? He went quiet. His firm issued a bland statement, pledging diversity initiatives. But his name had become shorthand for something larger, the arrogance of power met by the truth of talent. As for Jada, she didn't just reclaim her voice. She amplified it, not with anger, not with revenge, but with every keystroke that reminded people, especially young, black girls with calloused fingers and closed doors, that their brilliance didn't need permission, only a moment, and the courage to seize it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.